Well, hello there YouTube, and welcome to the continuation of this portrait painting tutorial. I apologize for the delay. I had to get some stuff done on the computer before going live, but it is all done and we are here. So this is the painting that was started last time, which was Tuesday. Today's Thursday, which, by the way, remember that I will be doing these live painting sessions on YouTube for the general public on Tuesdays and Thursdays, typically between 7:15 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, take note of daylight savings time, because the daylight savings was put into effect. The clock changed, I think it was last week. So we are going to continue this now. So on the palette here, I have the same assortment of colors that I always have. It's listed in the description box for you. So what we're going to do first is we're going to test the painting and make sure, or at least figure out how dry it is. I switched from Williamsburg lead white to Michael Harding. So there's a chance that this might still be wet, or at least a little bit gooey. And if that's the case, which I think it is, it's not a big deal. It's just something to be aware of. So some of the paint is coming off. Some of it is in between drying. For the most part, it's still fairly wet. So you will notice that different paints with the same pigment, the same information, will behave differently from brand to brand. So for example, lead white, I'm using Michael Harding. I usually would have used Williamsburg. So the lead white here is actually drying a lot slower than what I'm used to. It's not a big deal. It's just something that I have to take note of and just work around. So I'm going to mix up a basic skin tone. I'm going to go with this yellow ochre, burnt sienna. We're just going to warm up somewhere, and then we're going to continue to build the painting as we were. So a little bit of Viridian. I want to mix a generous amount of paint. I actually forgot to put my palette in the palette box yesterday, so some of the paint might be a little bit in between drying. That's okay. Hey Laguna, or Lagina, I think that's how I pronounce your name. Hey Brian Wong. So remember, this is a public painting demonstration, so please feel free to ask any questions that are art related. So let's just test this out. Let's see. Okay, so it's a tad bit too orangey. So I'm going to go and contrast that orangey color. Hey Leonie. It's morning for you, okay. It's evening for me. Good morning to you. A little bit of Cerulean Blue. This is just how I warm up. I'm not going to just jump right into the eyes. I'm going to work around it and then make my way towards the eyes. A little bit of lead tin yellow and Cerulean Blue. Let's see what this does. Alright, perfect. That's the color that I want. So I can pretty much treat this painting as if I was working on it just an hour ago. It's not really all that dry. Some areas may be in between drying. So a little tip for those of you that are painting frequently. If you're painting like me every day or every other day or something like that, especially if you're going to work on the same painting, do not differentiate between one layer and the next if your paint is still wet. So I will not be able to use medium. I have Neo-Megilp medium there. I will not be able to use that today because the painting is still in its first layer. After this layer dries, I will be able to, if I want, change the consistency of the medium to oil paint. But no medium can be used today. We can keep working on it even though it's in between drying, so long as we don't change any of the drying properties of this layer. Yes, some spots are going to dry faster than others, and that's okay. As long as by the next time we work on it, it will be dry enough to change the consistency. Okay, so I'm looking back and forth at the reference and at the chat. So let me see what's going on here. Hey Angela, I had a notification that you sent me on Patreon, but I wasn't able to read it. But I will get to you on Patreon. It was just as soon as I was hitting the go live button on YouTube. Hey Christine. Hey Charles. How would I treat water mixable? I wouldn't treat them any differently. I would treat it the same. Especially, for example, we're mixing here on the palette right now. I'm gonna get something. Let's get a dark now. I'm gonna switch brushes. So I'm gonna have a light brush and a dark brush. So for example, with water mixable oil paints, it would definitely be wet if I started on Tuesday and I continued to work on the painting on Thursday. For most brands, they dry very slow, so I wouldn't really do anything different. I would just be mixing the same stuff, and I wouldn't add any extra medium. So I've switched to a dark brush, and we're gonna mix up a middle tone right across from the tear bag, adjacent to the tear duct. It's kind of a warmish color. A great question. Water mixable oil paints are pretty good to use if you are if you have some health reasons that you can't use something like odorless mineral spirits. And if you're going to use water mixables, I would highly suggest Cobra Talons. So let's see what this color looks like. Question from Angela. If the paints are getting older in the tube, more difficult to paint, should you use medium solvent or linseed oil? You mean if the paint is drying in the tube? If that's what your question is, you can add a little bit of linseed oil to it, because what happens sometimes, especially with brands like brands that don't have anything other than pigment and oil, they will dry in their tube after some period of time. So in that case, just add a couple drops of linseed oil to the dried kind of flaky paint in your tube. If it's overly dry, then there's really nothing that can be done if it starts to solidify. But sometimes if the pigment separates from the oil, you can add a little bit of linseed and mix it with a palette knife. The question from Charles: would you advise a quick drying medium in that case? Oh, I would be if you were in a hurry to create a painting. I mean, like in a hurry to create a painting. I would use Alkyd oil paints for your under layers instead of adding a fast dryer to your paint, because alkyds are going to be more or less kind of homogeneous, meaning the oil paint is from the factory, from the store. It already has fast dryer in it. I mean, you can add something to it like liquid or whatever, and it'll have the same effect, similar effect. But the problem is, you're not going to be as precise with your ratios as, say, like from the tube alkyd would be. Very delicate little form there. Alright, what do you say we just start to do some stuff for the eyes? Yep, no problem, Angela. Okay, so for the eyes, I'm going to use a Sable, and I'm going to use, let's say, cat's tongue, not made from cat's tongues, but called a cat's tongue brush. And I'm going to use a round, so a cat's tongue and a round. So these are the brushes, a cat's tongue and a round. So I'm gonna just draw with the round, put in some of the accents for the eyes, and then I'll use the cat's tongue brush, do some stuff in between. Yep, no problem, Charles. Very carefully now, going for the accent for the upper eyelid where it meets the eye socket area. And as I move from different camera angles and different scenes on the stream, you can kind of see, almost as if you're standing back, what the painting looks like. So this is good to show you that it's important to stand back. Now this becomes more flat. It starts to curve. Now we're going to mix with the cat's tongue Sable, something a little more pink, throwing in some Alizarin permanent. Now if any of you have some problems with working with traditional oil paints, specifically because of the solvent, remember that there are alternatives to odorless mineral spirits. One alternative would be spike lavender oil. The next alternative would be safflower oil. I use safflower oil to clean my brushes. No, I don't. Never mind. Actually, I do. Sometimes I've used safflower oil to loosen up the paint on my brushes, but that's not the reason I use it. I use it to clean the palette. So I clean my palette with safflower oil. Not from the store safflower oil, but Gamblin brand safflower oil. Now, as this is a tutorial style video, I'm going to explain a little bit of my thought process at this stage. So now what I'm doing is I'm getting a little bit of a darker color each time. And I'm focused more in the values right now. Very carefully going and putting in the forms. Color-wise, different accents. So this was the accent for the eyelid, meaning the eye socket area. This is going to be the accent for the eyelash. And it's way cooler. Now her eyelid is not very tall on the, say, the vertical axis. It's more compressed. So if I capture this right away, it will help me get her likeness. Now I'm going to mix up let's say a light green. A light green for the iris. Now some of my online students have had some interest in painting this same painting with me, this one that we're working on. So any online students that are watching, if you're interested, I will post the photo reference on Patreon, and you'll be able to send the image to me for the virtual classroom if you choose. Let's make it a little darker and more gray, darker grayish blue. Notice I'm holding the camera shot in this angle a little bit longer. Okay, so let's mix up a dark for the pupil. Dioxazine purple. Alizarin. Now I'm gonna get a round brush, another round brush, and we're gonna get the highlight on the pupil. Hey, Cameron Stancer. No worries. I was late too. It's all good. Is the painting in proper focus? This shot is, but I have you zoomed in the same frame. So when you're looking at the close-up, this is a little bit out of focus looking. It's the only way I can get that camera shot without using an extra camera. Now for the Sclera. Hey, Visitor 05. Hello there. Hi, Libertas. Remember, the Sclera is not just a bright white. Don't just put white for the white of the eye because it's called the white of the eye. It usually has some kind of skin tone in it, and it's a mid-tone. It is not as bright as straight up white. Now, due to the glare, it's going to look like it's straight up white. So to fix the glare, to get rid of glare, we're going to switch to our trusty fan brush. Now the sclera of the eye is like a sphere. Think of it like a sphere. So you know that with a sphere, as planes on a sphere turn away from the light, they get darker. And it's the same with the sclera. So this is going to get progressively lighter or darker. Somebody mentioned something about multitasking, and believe me, I understand. I understand. Dark for the eyelash extends a little further now. Angela, putting the light reflection on the eye is always magical. Yeah, I can totally agree. Putting the highlight on the pupil. That's a tad bit dark. Sometimes I have a little too much paint on here. I'll take some off. So here's where I'm just mixing whatever. What I want is something dark. Maybe darker than that. Something dark, kind of brown and reddish. Let me stand you back now. Now what I want is something dark and reddish, but closer to the pink or closer to the blue spectrum. So Alizarin mixed with all this stuff. Keep you a little further away for now. Make sure to always stand back. Alright, so I'm going to increase the bottom part of the pupil, or not the pupil, the iris. A little more round. Now we're back into close-up. Now we're going to switch to the cat's tongue. Black and white. Color is definitely very tricky. I tend to try and kind of think in color sometimes, just feel out the color. The tear duct actually meets with the corner of the eyelid, and then there's another plane here that we're going to paint in shortly. A whole world of complexity there. But it's fun. And the good news is, if you start, first you need to warm up before you get to this, which is what I did by mixing that highlight color, remixing it. The good news is, something that is this demanding of patience is something that you can get really, really good at if you give yourself the right time and you understand how you operate. So for example, if I'm painting for 1.5 hours, I may not have as much energy to focus my mind enough to paint something as complicated as an eye. So knowing the proper timing for when to do something that's more difficult, that requires more brain power, knowing what the right timing is for you in your painting session is something you should consider. I mean, it's a cliche. Everything in life is timing, right? Everything at its time. And painting is no different. That's why I really don't think alla prima portrait is a good idea. It's a great marketing strategy if you're trying to get people interested in taking classes with you and things like that. But to actually create a painting, you need to have the patience and the time to do it. Hey, Tess, was the painting dry today? Some parts of it is, some parts are not. So that's why I'm treating this layer just as if it was the first layer. So I'm not using any extra medium. Oh yeah, black and white. When it comes to color, definitely experience is the best teacher. But there's also ways to improve your color, such as doing color study, painting objects and the same object in different light conditions. And you mix color very rapidly, and it becomes very intuitive after some time. So I have you zoomed out for a little bit. And another factor that determines how well you learn and how fast you learn is also just having the right tools, the right materials, and the right projects to work on, the right paintings to work on. Now, experience is the best teacher, of course, but when you are learning under the proper conditions, using the proper materials, you will learn faster than trying to do it all on your own. Not saying that it's impossible to learn it all on your own, but it helps to have some guidance. For example, I just got into, I'm into many things. I mean, not just painting, but one of the more recent things that I've been interested in is rollerblading in skate parks and things like that. So, I mean, obviously I wear like helmet and all the protection, whatever. But I know someone that was a professional rollerblader, and he was a pro. I mean, he was like top 10, I think, in the ASA pro competitions in the 90s and early 2000s, and he teaches me so much. Sometimes I just learn from just watching how he skates. And I feel like I've learned so much with him, just skating with him, than I would just on my own. Now we're getting some more form for the eye. So everyone here has the ability to learn. Everyone here has learned things to a very high level, whether it was in college, on the job, life experience. You've all learned, and you have the capacity to learn. So you know how you learn. Some of us are more We learn by doing, others learn by watching. And it's important to, whatever your learning method is, to have the proper guidance. Alright, so I've done a lot to this eye. Now we're going to use this eye to gauge everything else. So if I have to move this shape, for example, or this shape, it's not a big deal. I can move it without too much of an issue. So on the palette, I'm just going to take whatever is dark and just draw with it. Ideally, I'm going to make it a little more blue. No medium. Get you the close-up shot. What you can do is use a horizontal line and figure out, is the other tear duct lower or higher, and by how much, than the other tear duct. Okay, so here's the horizontal, and I'm going to put my first guesstimation down. My first guesstimation. It should be lower than this tear duct. By the way, remember the camera is at an angle with respect to the painting, so you will see it differently than what I'm seeing. So it needs to drop just a tad bit more. And that ought to be good. Now I'm just going to use this to draw. Another measurement before I get any further to be aware of is that the distance between the eyes is roughly the same as the length of one of the eyes. And it's the same with this model, if not just a little bit smaller. So the distance between the eyes, you see this, is roughly equal to the length of, or the width of one of the eyes, except with this model it's a little smaller. So that's good. We've pinpointed where we need everything to go. That's why this particular tutorial video is titled Drawing with Color, because we're literally doing that. We're drawing with color. And the same concept of building the painting from the inside out is what we're using. Just like from last time, we were building the painting from the inside out. And we're going to lighten this value slightly, mixing into whatever. I tend to just mix into my old puddles. No such thing as an ugly color. All colors must be related to one another. And that's how you create color harmonies. Get you back to the close-up. Now I do paint a lot faster than this on my own. For my Zoom one-on-one students, we paint on Zoom together. We're working on our own paintings, or students can be working on their projects. I paint at my normal pace and converse with my students, and I move much faster. when I do my online lessons, I'm even slower than this. So, for example, in an online lesson, in each project, I actually do intentionally slow myself down more than this. I usually don't just jump right into color. I will build it up from an underpainting. So I think I was a little bit ambitious when I said I would finish this in 2 or 3 streams. I haven't really received any questions, but I'm assuming that's because everyone is attentive to what I'm doing. This is a very critical stage in the painting. This is the part where if something goes wrong, it's gonna go wrong pretty bad. With the eyes in particular. So I'm gonna mix up the pupil, or the not the pupil, the iris color. Make sure it's similar, or if not exact, to the other iris. It needs to be a little more blue and a little darker. Now at this stage, a tool that would be very useful, and this is a tool that I oftentimes lose in the studio, but I have luckily located it, is calipers. So for example, the length or the width of the eyes should be the same, so this one needs to grow. And you see, we were drawing with color. The layer underneath of here is actually dry. So some areas that were more thin ended up drying, while others did not. There we go, that fits. Now we're going to mix up the pupil. Hey Linda. Do I find that oil paints dry darker? Not really. I think they dry true to the color depending on if the paint sinks in or not. It can be the case though that some oil paints will dry darker. But typically no. I would say I think acrylics dries. I think it dries darker, I'm not sure. I really haven't had any of my paints dry a different value unless they sink in. If they sink in, then they're gonna look lighter. Use the fan brush. A little more light in this iris. Alright, we're gonna get a highlight just like before. Now we're gonna mix up the Sclera color. Using the same old pile of paint, same old puddle. Keep you a little further back. And that value should actually be a little lighter. It's receiving more light. Hey Vester, welcome to the live painting tutorial. A little lighter, but I've got to be careful and make sure it doesn't get as light as the highlight on the pupil. Hey Vester, not sure what you mean by that comment, but okay. Hey Stephanie. No worries. I'm applying the middle tones, the Sclera. Very carefully trying to curve the sphere of the Sclera. Now that we have the eyes somewhat in place, we're going to have to start to go into the shadows, and this is a good place to start to do that. And remember, I drew with raw umber last time, so I guarantee you this is dry. Raw umber has the property of fast drying. Has some fast drying properties to it. So for the shadows, it's just going to be my first guesstimation. I'll mix it somewhat over here. Go for a nice brown towards maybe the blue violet. Now I'm going to add the tiniest amount of mineral spirits. And actually, if I want to use medium, I can, since that is dry. But I'm not going to. Actually, let's get you in the further away camera angle. I'm gonna make that darker. The photo reference definitely flattens out the shadows. They look way too dark. So I'm not going to make it quite as dark, but it is going to get a little darker. Let's test this one out. It's better. Getting there. Perhaps now a tad bit too warm. Using my weaker blue, very subtle blue, Cerulean Blue. It doesn't have very high tinting strength, which is excellent for making things only slightly more blue. And that's exactly what I want. And this is a very smooth panel that I'm working on. It's an ampersand panel, ampersand brand. It's layered with oil paint. So this is oil paint, so it sticks really nicely. And the more you layer it, the more rich the surface feels. Especially with lead white. Lead white has this kind of stone-like feel to it after more layers. Hey Austin, welcome to the stream. What is the price for your portrait, this 12 by 16? So when this one is finished, the price, probably not a good business strategy for me to say, but I have a link to my Etsy where I have one painting currently for sale, the bell pepper painting from last week. So I'll have to get back to you on that. Normally I would just tell you if we were just painting in person or something. But this one will be for sale once it's finished. Hopefully next week. And it will be at a first come, first served basis. But it's not going to be crazy expensive, I'll just say that. I did not increase my prices. There's some fancy meals that are gonna, fancy restaurants that'll cost you more than what you would pay for this painting. Question from Austin. How do you select your models? Good question. I will paint whoever will pose for me, really. I painted this model from life, and if you go to my Instagram, there's a larger painting of her that I did with a boa constrictor and all kinds of wonderful things in the environment. She posed from life for me. I didn't paint the environment from life. I made that up. But basically, whoever will pose for me, I'm not very picky. Thanks, Barbara, with the comment with the likeness. Question from Angela: does lead white or flake white replacement Winsor Newton work? I don't know if Winsor Newton has a flake white replacement. I know that they have a flake white hue, which might be the same, kind of similar. I've used that before, and it's a little more, how to put it, creamier than the flake white replacement from Gamblin, but it'll work. It's a little more creamy, should I say. It's more creamy than the flake white replacement from Gamblin. And it might dry a little more slowly, but I don't remember. The last time I used it was probably like, I don't know, like 3 years ago maybe. Oops, I forgot to change that camera angle. I knew that would happen to me at some point. So I've just been working on this edge now. Hey, Gustin. Well, yeah, if you would like to pose for me. Unfortunately, my portrait painting group, kind of sad news, my portrait painting group is being canceled. I was running it for like, I don't know, since like 2017, no, maybe 2018. I mean, I've been running it for a couple years, but it's getting canceled because this year, this school year, I was not able to get enough students, or not students, but artists to join me. So I don't really have a place to pose people anymore, but I will be going to other painting groups. I'm located in Maryland. But yeah, if anyone watching is in the Maryland area, if you want me to paint you, and you pose for any of the local art groups around here, I can probably make it there. Not very likely currently with my schedule, but I would like to go to more painting sessions. Okay, so now I'm going to use the same color, but maybe make it a tad bit more blue for the nose, the edge of the nose. Let's do that. Now as I do this, I have a chance to paint in the dark light for the edge of the nose. I'm just going to keep it at this camera angle so I don't forget to switch it. Remember, the dark light is the midtone. Just as light transitions into shadow, this is the value that determines whether or not a form is curving. And I'm kind of using little zigzag marks for that. Zigzag brush marks. I'll zoom you out. Okay, so shadow color, but we're throwing in a tad bit more blue. Now, one thing I'm definitely going to want to do before today ends is cover the background. Because once we start to get light and shadow, there I go, forgetting again. So once I get light and shadow colors, which we're actually doing now, it's going to be important to relate it to the background. So you have three major relationships: light, shade, background. You can get those colors to relate properly to one another, you're in a good place. If you don't, it's okay. This is a building process. Hey, Augustin. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Angela, yeah, I guess maybe the more you paint someone, the more you know them, kind of. I mean, there's some models that I've painted so many times, and I guess the more I paint them, the more used to their facial features I am. I'll just use the same shadow color. We're going to throw in a touch of blue next to the eye. I'm using Cobalt Blue. Offset that reddish color that we had last time. Now by putting that shadow in, I'm also, putting the shadow in, I'm also articulating the light and shade terminator line. Now if you want a specific breakdown of what I'm talking about when I'm using these words, like terminator line, dark light, midtones, highlights, I can explain that to you. All you need to do is ask. Hey Rafa, I do take the reference photos of the models myself. Yes. And that's how I want to do commissions. I haven't been able to get any commissions in a long time, and that's because I want to take the references myself. I want to actually be able to paint the client from life at least once or twice in the process of a commission portrait. Okay, so let's move towards the nose now, and I'm going to put you to the palette once again. Hopefully I remember to change this camera angle. Still got 20 minutes, plenty of time. So I really do enjoy using this palette, and I made a promise to myself that at the age of 30 I would figure out a palette, um, a wooden palette that I would want to use for the rest of my life. Like Nelson Shanks, my superhero. If you haven't heard of Nelson Shanks, definitely look him up. He had the same wooden palette that he used for so many years. So many years. And the palette itself is a work of art. So tomorrow, tomorrow's my birthday. So I'm turning 31. And also kind of a birthday for this palette, this wooden palette. So after tomorrow, I can now say that I've been using this palette since I was 30, because I started using it in October. So shout out to anyone else that has a birthday in March. Now the nostrils are a little distorted in the painting. In the picture. I distorted them even more in the painting, so this nostril has to lower slightly. Oh, thanks, Barbara. Hey, Hyman. Thank you for your comment. Hey, Leonie. Oh, thank you. I'll just be painting. That's how I'll spend my birthday. That's how I always want to spend my birthdays. Hey, Stephanie. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So she's written, sorry to hear about the in-person portrait painting group. Well, thank you for your kind words. Thank you so much for the super chat. You know what time it is? Time for super chat to Grumpy Cat. Anyone that's new to these painting sessions, now portrait painting tutorial live. Every time I get a super chat, we have super chat Grumpy Cat. So super chat Grumpy Cat is over here holding the paintbrushes, saying thank you, thank you, thank you for your super chat, Stephanie Thompson. One more in front of the palette. Super chat Grumpy Cat holding the paintbrushes says, Stephanie, thank you very much for your super chat. Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, Angela. So the nose, the bottom of the nose was distorted. Right, right there. So Robert, you just joined the online classes. I will be sending you the links with all the necessary information and project playlists as soon as I'm done with the stream. So we're gonna paint the plane underneath of the nostril. This might be one of my favorite stages, I think, in all of portrait painting. The in the middle stages where things start to look like something. I don't think the beginning is my favorite. It used to be my favorite stage, but now I think the middle stages is my favorite. Thanks, Stephanie. And this mid-tone across from the nose, you'll see it's painted a dark reddish color in a lot of Rembrandts, a lot of Rembrandt paintings, and oftentimes they just look like a single brush mark. Pretty neat to witness that on a person. Okay, so now I'm noticing that the nose, the bulb of the nose is a tad bit too wide. So I'm going to use the shadow color, but with a thin brush to push it ever so slightly. And I usually tell my students, although it may sound pessimistic, portraiture is the story of how a bunch of little things either made my day or ruined my day. So the lesson to get out of this is that the little things are very important. I need to get a new fan brush. That fan brush almost took out this eye. Hey Janice, thank you. Thanks for the birthday wishes, everyone. I'm more excited for my palette than my own birthday. I'll finally be able to say that I've been using this thing since I was 30. And hopefully my painting career will be very long, so this palette will be used so much. It will be a work of art in and of itself. Hey Augustin, what do I think about Caravaggio paintings? I think they are one of the most iconic, let's just say, a group of paintings in all of art history, because before Caravaggio, there was Titian, of course, who was an incredible painter on his own, in his own right. But other than Titian, before Caravaggio, I hope I'm getting my art history right. Before Caravaggio, most of what people painted was two-dimensional looking stuff because that was the style. After Caravaggio, you notice, especially with the Caravaggisti painters, which led into more of the Baroque era style paintings, it completely revolutionized painting. Hey, Legina, thank you. Wait a minute. Your last name. I've painted you, haven't I? You seem familiar. Some more of these dark lights for the nose, and I'm forgetting to change the camera. Apologize for that. Yeah, let's just keep it at this camera angle for now. We've only got like 10 minutes left. And for the most part, I think I've said what I wanted to say with the eyes and the nose. Obviously, they're not finished, but we need to move on to other things. Of course, I'm not going to rush it. And when you're painting form like this, always try to abstract the structure. Don't think about it as a nostril. I'm trying the most that I can to think about this as kind of like a little bridge, a bridge, and I'm thinking of the topography of the bridge, or just think about it as a sculpture. What is the angle of each plane? I'm pushing the light underneath of the nose temporarily. I'm gonna add the dark. I'm just gonna kind of fluff that out. I'm probably not gonna make it down there. Okay, so let's just throw a highlight onto the nose, and let's move to the ear. Alright, for the ear, some of the hair is actually blocking the ear, so we're gonna have to picture it without the hair for now. And we're just gonna roughly sketch in some light and shadow. We'll add more specifics to it later. So the helix of the ear is this little loop. The anti-helix is out there. Tragus of the ear is a little bump that should be visible right there. Angela is cadmium green, similar to permanent. Hold on. So you just asked me a question. I think I might be able to answer this. Let's see. Is cadmium green similar to permanent lemon yellow? Cadmium green is a little less of a tinter. Cadmium green doesn't tint as much as the anything permanent green. Anything permanent green is usually a pretty strong tinter. But hue-wise, they can be similar. No worries, Angela. Don't worry about it. I really do appreciate the questions, whether it's on Patreon or on here. Hey, Onions on everything. I like your username. Sure you can. You could do this. This is what I always say. Anyone that can paint, anyone that can draw, and paint. And drawing is, anyone can learn to draw. Drawing is a very teachable thing. Therefore, painting is a very teachable thing. Therefore, it is a very learnable thing. If you want to learn how to paint like this, you can do it. With the right guidance, the right stepping stones, you can. Yep, no problem, Angela. Hey, Onions on everything. Oh, good. See, you've got a great start already. You do draw. So remember, painting is just drawing, drawing with color, just like the title of this tutorial. Oh, thanks, Barbara. Hey, Augustin. Let's see, you have to continue teaching portrait painting. Is it on Patreon? Yes, I do teach mainly portraiture on Patreon, although we do figure as well. I have included figure painting into my online classes. For example, we do figure painting in black and white, so we paint from master studies. So this is what we are currently working on. This is a figure painting that we started on Wednesday. So new lessons come out on are streamed on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Hey Brian Wong, what is the definition of planes in portraiture? Excellent question. So a plane is a two-dimensional surface, a two-dimensional flat surface that has a specific angle relative to the light. So for example, if you're looking at this, you see how it's brighter here? This is a flat plane that is receiving more light because this angle relative to the light in the room is closer to perpendicular. The closer this gets to parallel, you see how it's getting darker? The closer this gets to parallel, the closer it will get to the shadow. And once it's parallel like this, then it's in the shadow. See how each angle? Okay, so now it's pretty much in the light. So as the angle changes closer to perpendicular, it will get lighter. And when it is perpendicular, it is a highlight. So on a portrait, it's the same thing. Think about this as that DVD that I was showing you. Each plane here, this is lighter, So it's closer to perpendicular to the light source. This is a highlight, so it probably is perpendicular to the light source. This is in shadow, so that means that this plane is parallel to the light source. So that is the definition of planes, more of a long kind of explanation of it, but that's what planes are in portraiture. And it applies to the same thing. It applies, the same thing applies to anything else, whether it's a landscape, figure, still life, all of it. Yep, no problem, Brian Wong. Now we're not going to do too much for the helix of the ear, as we're going to paint over that with the model's hair next time. And I don't think we're going to do anything for the background yet this time, because I need more time to actually think this background color through. So we're not really doing much with color yet in terms of color relationships. Obviously we're doing a lot with color with the skin tones, but that's pretty decent progress for the second sitting on this painting. Okay, so that should be about it for tonight. Remember, I am doing these live painting videos every Tuesday and Thursday around 7:15, from 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I have moved these the flow of these live streams to a more kind of tutorial type setup. So hopefully you're enjoying these streams. I'm going to hang out for a little bit and see if there are any last minute questions. And of course, another thank you to Stephanie Thompson for your super chat today. Thank you so much for that. Oh, that's right. Remember, online students on Patreon, if you would like to paint this same painting with me, I will post the photo reference on Patreon, and you can send me images for the virtual classroom so I can give you feedback if you would like. No problem, Augustin. It's okay, don't worry. But yeah, we'd love to have you in the online classes. Thanks for joining, Charles. Oh, thanks for the happy birthday, Canvas Dancer. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that comment. So yes, remember the online classes start out at just $10 a month, and in the $10 a month you get access to all of the pre-recorded videos for all of the lessons, as well as the virtual classroom, which means you have the ability to send me up to 2 images each week for feedback. Yeah, Laguna, yeah, your name sounds very similar to someone I met, but yeah, I think I got it confused. No problem. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more last minute questions. So once again, thank you so much for watching. As always, if you want to take your online education with me further, please check out my online classes on patreon.com/upariartist. Also listed in the description box for you and pinned as the top comment in the chat section of this live stream. Thank you so much. I wish you the very best in all of your artwork, and I will see you on the next one.